Hey guys, Mortorcus here. So today we saw some troll cards being revealed for the Freljord, but unfortunately I haven't had the chance to do my impressions on the Ionia cards that got shown yet, including Lulu, the new champion for them. So today we're going to be doing that, and then tomorrow when clearly Trundle is going to be revealed, we're going to go over the cards from today and those cards as well. So today is just the Lulu stuff and all the Ionia cards, so let's hop right into it. So first we're going to look at Lulu herself, which is a 3-mana 2/3 with support. My supported ally grows up to a 4/4 this round, and her level up condition is our allies have been supported 3+ times. This includes being able to be leveled up from the deck, so she is very easy to level up. 3 supports shouldn't be very hard at all with all the support cards that we're getting these days, and she'll probably fit into a deck with a lot of those types of things. Then when she levels up, she gains round start, create a fleeting help picks in hand, and her support buff goes up by +1/+1, and she also goes up by +1/+1. This help picks card is a 1-mana burst spell, which is fleeting and gives an ally barrier or an enemy vulnerable this round, and it can't be cast in combat or in response to a spell. This is kind of the same way that gems work. This idea that you can't use them in combat, you use them without giving your initiative back to your opponent just before you do something as an action, or normally before combat. In the reveal video for Lulu, we did see her being paired with Demacia and Fleet Feather Tracker and stuff like that. I think a deck like that would work really well for her. With like War Chefs and things like that, you've already got that as a very good support card, which would fit right in. And obviously Fleet Feather Tracker is a very good 1-drop that you could really enjoy buffing with her ability here. I also really got my brain going about like a Von Yip deck, because you have all these 1-drops and stuff like that. So you get the upside with pairing them with Von Yip, but also the upside pairing them with Lulu. Though you definitely have to run a few support cards along the way, just so that you're making sure that she does level up. Though her leveling up won't be that vital, I think her on her own, just giving the +4 or just making them into a 4/4 would still be very impactful. She's definitely a little bit weak with her 2/3 stat line, a little bit vulnerable as a 3-drop at that stat line. But pairing her with challengers like the Fleet Feather Tracker or Flame Chompers or anything else like that would be a great way to keep her alive, which, I mean, any support unit that's true for. So I think that running a few challengers here and there will definitely be a good idea in a deck with her. And when she does level up, using her help picks seems like it could be very strong, because giving something vulnerable means that you can pull stuff out of the way for Lulu so she doesn't have to go into combat with them, or you can give her barrier so that when she attacks, she isn't actually in as much of a threat unless your opponent does use removal on her. In terms of on defense, though, you can kind of only use the barrier because the vulnerable won't really do anything, and your opponent will anticipate that happening, so I think they'll often be incentivized to open attack so that you don't get the chance to cast your help picks, because you won't actually have a turn before the combat happens. Though still, that may not always be beneficial to your opponent. They may not have a great board setup to go into an open attack at the start of the round with. So we'll see how that ends up being. But I think in general, she's already very good on attack, being a support unit. So I think it's fine if help picks isn't that great on defense. It's still something sometimes. And on offense, she's going to be a powerhouse of tempo decks and stuff like that. I think we'll definitely be able to make very competitive tempo-oriented support, like fast decks with 1-drops and stuff, with Lulu in them in this coming expansion for sure. So now let's look at her champ spell, which is a 4-mana burst spell. Transform a follower into a squirrel and silence it this round. So because it is temporary, using it outside of combat is not very effective because of the fact that you would have to follow it up with some sort of removal to get rid of it, like maybe a Mystic Shot, a Thermo Beam for 1 damage, a Vile Feast, anything like that. And using 2 spells to remove 1 thing doesn't always feel that great. So I think it's much more likely to be used in combat when you're going for an attack and they declare the blocker, or when you are blocked when you're attacking. Either way, you can turn their thing into a 1/1 and easily deal with it. In those cases, it's basically as good as a Vengeance almost. You're only taking 1 damage on the unit that's in combat with them, so it's almost as good in that case. And if you're using an Overwhelm unit, it's like 1 less damage to Nexus. It's normally not going to be that much weaker than just using a Vengeance, though I suppose you could still buff the 1/1 afterwards, so buffs could still be relevant. But that's a little bit more awkward anyways. It's still a 1/1. Making a 1/1 useful is going to be hard for your opponent to do. It's also sometimes good in other weird cases, like if your opponent's trying to use an atrocity or something. The fact that it is burst does mean that you can skip the stack entirely and not have to have them throw that at the end or something, in the same way that if you had went for a Vengeance on their minion, they could have played the atrocity after, and then bam, you no longer get to kill their unit, they are using it for damage. In this case, they'd try to do that, and now it's a 1/1, so it's not very effective with atrocity at all, is it? So, well, I don't think it's quite as good as Will or Vengeance or things like that, especially outside of combat. Inside of combat, I think it'll be very strong, and because it is cheaper than both of those options, I think it'll just be a very good card. I think it's possible that sometimes in certain metas you might want Will instead, but I think in most cases, especially in a Lulu deck where you're clearly going to be a very tempo-oriented deck, it will make a lot of sense, and it will feel very good as her champ spell when you end up drawing into your extra Lulus and things. And the next card we have is Pix, which is her fairy friend, of course. 1 mana, 0/1, support, give my supported ally +2/+1 this round. So in Legends of Runeterra, the 2/2 stat line is kind of the base stat line for 1-drops, because of the fact that it's a little bit bigger than they are in like other card games like Hearthstone maybe. But because of spell mana, 1-drops have to be very impactful, or else you'd rather just save your mana for later. So this one gets you that 2/2 stat line with the stats put together after he's attacked. But the thing is, he's also very fragile at his 1 health and 0 attack. So if he does get blocked, he's going to die immediately. You're going to hope that your support really mattered and was really worth it. Otherwise, it feels like kind of a waste of a card. And if he was just removed by some 1 damage removal, like a Make It Rain or something, you're really going to feel bad because he didn't do anything at all. Obviously, pairing him with a challenger will always be good. Same way that's the situation with most of these support cards. But even then, unless it makes a really good trade, he's probably going to die pretty soon regardless. I don't think you'll get multiple attacks off with him. He is pretty interesting in the fact that he's a 1 mana support, so getting your supports early could be very important. But I think I'd rather have a 1-drop into a 2 mana support versus this into a 2 mana non-support. and supporting it that way. I think that dynamic would make a lot more sense. I do have some interest in the fact that it clearly works very well with Lulu, because Lulu can just make it a 4/4, and then you're getting a +2/+1 and a 4/4 and all this stuff, so that seems cool. And if I did go for this Von Yip Lulu idea, he would make sense as a good 1-drop in that, perhaps, because then you do get that support in that deck. But that's probably just going to be a bit of a meme. We'll see if it ends up having any viability behind it. But in general, I think this one's a little bit weak. Unless you really need those early support triggers, I think this one's not going to make any sense. Then we have Fey Guide, which is a 4-mana 3/3 with the play effect of grant an ally elusive. So this is a permanent elusive buff. In Ionia, we already have Ghost, which is 1 mana for a temporary elusive buff for that round. I think in most cases, Ghost is probably going to be better than this, because I think a lot of the time, I mean, if you're thinking of this going into an elusive deck, it's really not going to make a lot of sense. You're going to have a few non-elusive cards like Zed perhaps, and you give it elusive, but you don't really expect that it'll survive all the way until it gets 2 attacks, if someone's already having it as a priority target for removal and stuff like that. So normally you're going to get like 1 elusive trigger off of it. If that was the case, Ghost is just going to be better. And unless it's like a really large unit that you think is very resilient and is somehow not going to just kill them when it gets the attack in, then this is normally always going to be worse than Ghost. The only time you're really going to be happy about this is if you're putting it on something slower, something larger, and you're not really getting any other attacks in it at all, and you actually expect to live and not get hit by some large removal like Vengeance or something like that. Or maybe you have some way to protect it that way. But all of these seem like way too slow or hard to pull off. And if you're just waiting to be able to play it on the right unit, then it's just a dead card for a long time. If the thing that you grant elusive ends up dying before it even gets to use it, then it's just a 4-mana 3/3, which is really bad. So I think in most cases you'd rather use Ghost, and for me personally, I haven't ran Ghost in a lot of decks. I don't think it's normally very good. I think it often, the same way that this would just sit in your hand and wait around and not really get to do much. I don't think this is going to make very much sense. I think if you try to play it on curve, it's always going to be underwhelming. And if you try to wait around, it's going to be even more underwhelming. So just play Ghost if you want elusive, and if it's not even worth that much, then just try something else. Then our next card is Young Witch, 2 mana 1/1 elusive with support. Give my supported ally quick attack and +1/+0 this round. So she's an elusive support unit, which is very interesting because it means that she is protected from being able to be blocked and easily removed when she goes for her attack, which means that her support will probably be able to be triggered more than once, aside from the fact that of course she is very squishy at a 1/1, something like Vile Feast or Make It Rain, like these other 1 health cards. It would make her very easily removed in that way, but in terms of actual combat, she's going to be very safe in that situation. So I think that would be quite good. She's got like the same effect as Legion Drummer. You just get +1 attack instead, but Legion Drummer is a 3/2. Obviously, if you printed a 2 mana 3/2 elusive with no text, it would be insane. So it makes sense that this distribution of stats that they got here. I think Quick Attack is very powerful, and Legion Drummer is kind of already pretty decent. So this might just work quite well as one of these support guys that you want to run in these support decks. Even if it is a little bit hard to keep alive against certain decks who do run a lot of removal, against very minion-centric decks, it's going to get away with just continually attacking and triggering its effect over and over. And I think that'll be quite impactful. You can definitely play this and support a 1-drop that you just played, and that'll feel pretty good, I think. So I don't know if there's going to be many other like hugely better options than this if you are trying to get your supports in the 2-drop slot in these support decks. I know War Chefs is going to make sense if you're doing the Demacia version, but we're not always going to be doing the Demacia version. I think as long as the meta isn't too flooded with options that are going to be able to clear it out too fast, you'll normally be fine. And especially, like, even if they do use a removal on her, if you get 1 attack off, that's great. And you're eating 1 removal card still, so that's not the worst thing in the world. So I think it looks pretty decent. Then we have Flower Child, which is a 1 mana, 1/2. When I'm supported, grant me +2/+0. So clearly this is a great 1-drop to be supported by stuff like the Young Witch. If you did use the Young Witch on her, it would be immediately a 4 attack unit with quick attack on turn 2. Seems pretty good to me. This is a permanent buff, similar to a few other 1-drops we've seen, like the Green Glade Caretaker, which gets it when you get the barriers. It's got only 2 health, which, I mean, you couldn't really reasonably give it any more health than that. But as long as you, like, get a few attacks in with it, that'll be pretty great. So I think in a tempo-oriented support deck, this and Young Witch work really well together, and this with other valuable 2-drop supports, I think it'll just be quite good. I think you'll definitely want to run it and stuff like that. And again, I was talking about the Von Yip deck with the 1-drops and stuff with Lulu. I think this would be great in that deck. So I think it's going to be quite good, unless you have some better 1-drops that you really think you don't have the slots for this one. I think this is probably going to be able to make it into those decks, and it looks quite good at that. Then we have Fuzzy Caretaker, which is a 4 mana 3/3. When I'm supported, give me +0/+3 this round, and give my supported ally +3/+0 this round. So that's very interesting, because it means that if you have 2 other units, one that's supporting it and one to be supported by it, then that makes it a 4 mana 6/6 effectively for the round, and that seems quite good. The only issue there is assuming that stat line actually happens. You have to have that developed board and your units not having been removed or anything yet by that point. If you don't get that full effect, it by itself isn't super great. I think the getting supported part is a lot better because health is much more valuable. But the support effect that it gives is also not too bad. I think if you are really hurting for supports, you'll want to run this. Otherwise, getting the full value out of it seems a bit iffy. I don't think a 3/6 that is going to lose back to 3 health anyways, or less than that depending on your trade, is super great just on its own. So if it's not getting both of the effects, I think it's not going to be really worth having around. But if you do really need an extra support card to hit that like critical mass in these support decks, especially like if you are running an Ionia Targon deck with Taric, and Taric might need a bit more support, then maybe he makes sense. But I think he's going to be one of the first ones you're going to cut unless you really just don't have something in that slot, that like 4-drop kind of slot. But when he does like hit for sure, like get the 3 units at once, I think he's going to be really good. And I do think that is a consideration in all of these support decks, is that they kind of assume that you'll have units around. So if you don't, it's going to be a lot more awkward for you. Then we have Tasty Fayfolk, a 3-mana 4/2 lifesteal unit. So it's just vanilla lifesteal, but it's a 4/2, and that's pretty dang good. We have Emerald Awakener, which is a 3-mana 2/2 lifesteal that gets the extra stats when you hit 10 mana, but that's not going to be very great at the time that you play it early on. This one is going to be a lot more useful in contesting early threats and keeping you alive through that part of the game. And it's also comparable to, I think it's called Deadbloom Wanderer in Shadow Isles, which is a 3/2 for 3 mana with lifesteal, and it tosses you 3 cards. And that one's quite good. So I feel like this one is just great healing and easy contesting things early to just get you through to the late game in these slower decks. I think you'll really appreciate having this around for those situations. I don't really think you'll necessarily run it in anything outside of a control deck, just because the 2 health and it's a little squishy, and if you are kind of ahead on tempo on turn 3, you're not going to need the extra health anyways. But definitely a control deck, I'd like to have something like this. So I think it'll be quite good in Karma decks, if Karma decks are still around, and other slower Ionia decks if we have like Lee Sin actually doing something or anything like that. We'll see. But I'm sure he'll find a place somewhere to see some play at some point or another. So I think he's quite good. And then the last Ionia card we have is 4 mana 3/4 swole squirrel. Strike double my power. So this one looks hilarious. This guy's like the total meme man over here. Clearly he's been juicing off of Lulu's magic. There's a lot of different ways that you can make this kind of get really cheesed out of control. The first thing I think a lot of people think of is Judgment, where you can double his power so much you get like 200 attack or whatever. That's never likely to happen, because why would your opponent play into Judgment when you have a swole squirrel on board in a deck where you've paired him with Demacia? Seems extremely unlikely to me. And also that amount of damage is totally unnecessary for anything, given that you only need to do 20 damage to their Nexus anyways. But I think that paired with Noxus, he might be quite good. I think paired with Kato and doubling your power with Overwhelm and stuff like that, especially with Whirling Death, he could actually be a decent card. I think, you know, he looks kind of bad as a 3/4, but the 4 health is what really matters, because the attack is going to start doubling, especially if you have these synergy cards where you can strike earlier, like Whirling Death and things like that. So while I know he looks like quite a meme card, I think it's not crazy to assume that we might actually manage to have him actually be competitive in some kind of a deck. Especially in Noxus. I don't know about other regions, I haven't spent a ton of thought on stuff like that, but there's also definitely the consideration of, I believe it's Dragon's Rage, Lee Sin's champion spell, where you get to strike a unit and then the Nexus, so you get to double first, and that could just be a win condition sometimes if you manage to get him powerful enough, kind of in the same way that like Lee Sin really gets to go hard with that kind of stuff when you give him might. You could do the same thing here with him. You give him might and then you dragon kick or whatever. It could be a very powerful effect. So I am super excited to try a swole squirrel deck. I don't know how viable he's going to end up being, but I think he's a lot more viable than people are going to initially assume he is. And also he gets like MVP art over here and flavor. He's just so funny of a card. Alright, and the last card we have is a random Targon card that got thrown in there. Startled Stomper, 2 mana 2/3 with Overwhelm. So he's just a vanilla Overwhelm unit, but a 2 mana 2/3 is quite a good stat line, and Overwhelm on that would not be bad at all. I think he could be quite good in some of these tempo-oriented Targon decks, especially if you're buffing him, if you're supporting him. He's quite a very good buff or support target, and being able to do stuff with his Overwhelm could end up being very good. So I think he'll probably make it into a few decks, probably more than one different Targon-related archetypes. As long as they're tempo-oriented, I think he'll be a good inclusion in them. It's not the most exciting looking card in the world, but I think that just having good stats in a keyword is often enough to just make a card a competitive one. So that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Please leave a like if you enjoyed it. Comment down below what you think of Lulu and all the other Ionian cards that we've seen today. And please subscribe if you'd like to see more of my content in the future. Again, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it so much, and I'll see you guys